Every motorcycle forum debates rider skill and safety gear, but nobody talks about the bikes themselves being defective. What if I told you that some motorcycles left the factory with fatal flaws that no amount of riding skill could overcome? That's not a conspiracy theory. Documented defects have killed more riders than most people realize. Imagine buying a brand new sport bike only to have the frame crack beneath you at highway speed, or pulling the brake lever in traffic and getting nothing. In this video, I'm exposing the 15 motorcycles with engineered failures that cause fatal crashes. And trust me, the number one isn't from the 1970s. It's a defect that exists across 20 years of production and is still being sold today. Watch every second because this isn't opinion. These are documented recalls, lawsuits, and NHTSA investigations that prove when the machine fails, the rider dies. Number 15, Suzuki GSX-R1000 2024. We're starting with the newest bike on this list, and it proves that even in 2024, basic manufacturing errors can be deadly. The GSX-R1000 rolled off the assembly line with a drive chain that wasn't properly secured. Specifically, one of the chain links wasn't riveted by the supplier. Incomplete process control at the factory level meant some of these bikes left the dealership with a ticking time bomb in the drivetrain. Here's what happens when that link fails. The drive chain detaches from the sprockets. Instantly, you lose all power to the rear wheel. You're cruising along, maybe accelerating through traffic, and suddenly the bike stops pulling. The rear end destabilizes. You're fighting to keep it upright while cars are closing in around you. The NHTSA issued a recall, but the damage to rider confidence was already done. Brand new motorcycles shouldn't have components that can randomly detach. Number 14, Suzuki rear tire tread separation, 2024. Staying in 2024, another Suzuki issue emerged across multiple models. The rear tires on certain bikes developed cracking and deformation in the tread area. This wasn't from wear or rider abuse. This was a material failure in the tire construction itself. When tire treads start separating, you first feel violent vibrations through the bike. Then chunks of rubber start coming off at speed. The rear end begins oscillating. Your contact patch with the road is literally disintegrating beneath you. Total loss of stability follows quickly. You can't brake properly, you can't corner, you can't maintain a straight line. The investigation was still ongoing when the recall was issued, meaning Suzuki couldn't even explain why their tires were failing. That's not reassuring when you're the one riding on them. Number 13, Harley-Davidson V-Rod 2002. The V-Rod wasn't recalled for a mechanical defect, but its design created an inherent elevated risk that resulted in crashes. Harley built this bike with an aggressively raked, low-slung profile. It looked incredible sitting still. The problem emerged when riders actually tried to corner aggressively. The low center of gravity and stretched-out geometry meant minimal cornering clearance. Push it into a tight turn, and you're scraping hard parts almost immediately. There's virtually no margin for error during emergency maneuvers. Traditional sport bike geometry gives you options when things go wrong. The V-Rod's styling over function approach meant that when riders exceeded the bike's limited stability envelope, they were already past the point of recovery. It's a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous defect is prioritizing aesthetics over physics. Number 12, Kawasaki GPZ 750 Turbo and Honda CX-500 Turbo, early 1980s. The early 80s brought a brief, disastrous experiment: turbocharged motorcycles. Both Kawasaki and Honda rushed to market with forced induction before the technology was ready for two-wheeled applications. The fundamental problem was turbo lag, followed by violent boost. Imagine rolling on the throttle mid-corner. Nothing happens. You're waiting for power. Still nothing. Then suddenly, the turbo spools and delivers a massive, uncontrollable surge. The rear tire breaks loose or the front end lifts. You're getting thrown into a high-side crash where the bike launches you over the handlebars. Precise throttle control is essential on a motorcycle. These early turbos made that impossible. The power delivery was so unpredictable that even experienced riders couldn't compensate. Both manufacturers quickly abandoned the experiment, but not before numerous crashes proved the concept was fundamentally unsafe. We're just getting started, and already we've seen brand new bikes with unrivaled chains, disintegrating tires, and turbos that turned throttle inputs into Russian roulette. But the bikes coming up killed so many riders they became legendary for all the wrong reasons. Number 11, Suzuki TM400 Cyclone, 1971. Moving to the dirt, the TM400 Cyclone was a two-stroke dirt bike that combined massive power with a chassis that had no business trying to contain it. The engine's power band wasn't just aggressive, it was violent and unpredictable. You'd hit a certain RPM range and the bike would explode forward with zero warning. Pair that with an extremely lightweight, rudimentary frame and inadequate suspension, and you had a machine that was almost uncontrollable for average riders. Off-road riding requires precise control during jumps, whoops, and tight turns. The TM400 would suddenly surge exactly when you needed smooth power delivery. Riders were getting bucked off, crashing on landings, and losing control in situations where a more predictable bike would have been manageable. This wasn't a race bike for professionals. This was being sold to regular enthusiasts who had no chance of managing its violent character. Number 10. Yamaha V-Max First Generation, 1985 to 2007. The original V-Max defined the muscle cruiser category with its V-Boost system delivering over 110 horsepower to the rear wheel. That power figure impressed buyers. What didn't impress them was what happened when they tried to use that power in corners. The first generation frame was described as super flexy in a curve. That's engineering speak for a structural disaster. When you apply throttle while leaned over, the frame would twist and flex instead of maintaining rigid geometry. This created wildly unpredictable handling. The bike would feel stable one moment, then suddenly the rear end would step out, or the whole chassis would feel like it was writhing beneath you. Compared to contemporary sport bikes with properly rigid frames, the V-Max was guessing where it wanted to go. That unpredictability in fast corners led to numerous crashes. Yamaha eventually redesigned the frame for the second generation, tacitly admitting the original design was inadequate. Number 9. BMW K1200LT Paralever Final Drive, 1999 to 2005. BMW's reputation for quality engineering took a serious hit with the K1200LT's final drive failure. The crown gear bearing in the paralever system would disintegrate prematurely, creating two potentially fatal scenarios. First scenario, the damaged bearing would cause oil to seep onto the rear wheel and brake rotor. Suddenly you have no traction and no rear brake. You're trying to stop or turn, and the rear end is sliding on its own leaked fluids. Second scenario, somehow worse, the final drive seizes completely. The rear wheel locks up instantly. At highway speeds, a locked rear wheel almost guarantees a crash. You can't control it. You can't release it. You're just along for the ride until you hit something or go down. Over 145 complaints were filed, describing oil on wheels and sudden lockups. The NHTSA opened a formal investigation. This wasn't a rare manufacturing defect. This was a systemic problem affecting a substantial portion of bikes from specific model years. BMW owners who'd paid premium prices for German engineering found themselves riding bikes that could lock up without warning. These mechanical failures are exactly why understanding your bike's documented issues can literally save your life. If this deep dive into motorcycle defects is valuable to you, subscribe now because we're about to cover the bikes that earn names like Widowmaker for very specific, very deadly reasons. Number 8. Suzuki TL1000S, 1997. When the TL1000S launched, Suzuki tried to innovate with a rotary damper in the rear suspension. Innovation without adequate testing led to deaths. The rotary damper couldn't properly manage the powerful V-twin engine's dynamics, especially during rapid transitions. What riders experienced was sudden, violent, high-speed instability. The bike would develop uncontrollable weaving. Tank slappers would emerge seemingly out of nowhere. The handlebars would oscillate so violently that riders couldn't hold on. At least one documented fatality was directly attributed to this handling defect. Multiple crashes followed the same pattern. The bike would become unstable under conditions that shouldn't have been problematic, and the rider had no ability to recover. Suzuki eventually issued a recall to install conventional steering dampers, essentially admitting their innovative design was fundamentally flawed. But that recall came after riders had already died discovering the defect the hard way. Number 7. Kawasaki Ninja ZX-14 Frame Failure, 2006 to 2007. The ZX-14 was Kawasaki's flagship hyperbike. 2 years after launch, they discovered a manufacturing error that could cause the frame to collapse. At the factory, someone over-tightened the engine mount adjusting collars. That excessive torque stressed the welds on the lower rear cross member of the frame. Under normal riding, hitting rough surfaces or potholes, those stressed welds would crack. When the cross member fails, the entire rear suspension assembly can collapse. You're riding along, and the rear of your bike essentially folds up beneath you. There's no recovering from that. You're going down hard, and at the speeds the ZX-14 is capable of, you're probably not walking away. Kawasaki's official communication told owners, "Do not ride your motorcycle until this inspection has been completed." That level of warning means the manufacturer knew riders would die if they encountered this failure. This wasn't a maybe situation. This was a when situation. A simple factory assembly error nearly became a mass casualty event. Number 6. Suzuki GSX-R1000 Steering Neck Catastrophe, 2005 to 2006. The steering head on a motorcycle manages all turning forces and impacts. It's one of the most critical structural points on the entire bike. The 2005 and 2006 GSX-R1000 had frames that would crack or break in the structure behind and below the steering neck. Suzuki acknowledged receiving reports of failures in what they carefully termed extreme situations with unusually high stress. Translation: riders were pushing these bikes the way sport bikes are designed to be pushed, and the frames were breaking. One rider was rendered quadriplegic when his frame failed during a crash. Another crash was fatal. A class action lawsuit followed. The remedy was installing an aluminum reinforcing brace with bolts and epoxy adhesive. Think about that. On a bike designed for high-performance riding, Suzuki had to literally glue on extra bracing to prevent the steering head area from breaking apart. This wasn't a minor reinforcement. This was emergency structural repair to keep the front end attached to the rest of the motorcycle. Number 5. Harley-Davidson ABS brake failure, 2008 to 2011. Nearly 175,000 Harley-Davidson touring motorcycles were recalled for a defect that could eliminate your ability to stop. The ABS hydraulic control unit was prone to corrosion. Harley specified that brake fluid must be flushed every 2 years. If owners neglected that maintenance, moisture in the fluid would cause internal deposits and corrosion. Those deposits would cause a valve to stick. When that valve stuck, you'd experience sudden, unexpected reduction or total loss of braking ability. You pull the lever expecting to slow down and nothing happens. Or you get partial braking that's completely inadequate for the situation you're in. 43 complaints included 3 crashes and multiple injuries before the recall was issued. Here's the critical failure. A safety system shouldn't catastrophically fail because an owner missed a maintenance interval. Anti-lock brakes are supposed to make bikes safer. This design made them dramatically more dangerous if the fluid wasn't changed on schedule. The solution was flushing the entire system with a less corrosion-prone fluid. But that came after riders had already crashed because their brakes simply stopped working. We've now covered defects ranging from frames breaking apart to brakes that stopped working to innovative suspension systems that killed riders. But the top 4 bikes on this list earned reputations that transcend individual mechanical failures. These machines became notorious. Number 4. Harley-Davidson three-wheeler software malfunction, post-2018. A New York jury awarded $287 million in a case involving a Harley-Davidson three-wheeler. That verdict included $240 million in punitive damages. Punitive damages at that level send a specific message. The jury believed the manufacturer was grossly negligent. The allegation was that the vehicle's control system software activated unexpectedly, causing the three-wheeler to abruptly veer off course. That unexpected veering led to a fatal crash. What made the jury award such massive punitive damages was evidence suggesting Harley knew about the potential software malfunction, but failed to adequately address it. This case set a precedent for software defects in motorcycles. As bikes become more computerized, with electronic throttle control, traction control, and stability systems, software bugs aren't just inconveniences, they're potential death sentences. When your bike suddenly steers itself off the road because of faulty code, there's nothing you can do. The machine has made the decision for you. Number 3, Suzuki GSX-R and Hayabusa brake corrosion, 2004 to 2025. This defect spans over 20 years and is still affecting bikes being sold today. A class action lawsuit filed in 2025 alleges that Suzuki has known about galvanic corrosion in the front brake master cylinder across the GSX-R1000, GSX-R750, GSX-R600, and Hayabusa models since at least 2004. The zinc piston reacts with moisture absorbed by brake fluid, releasing hydrogen gas and causing pitting inside the master cylinder. This gradually reduces brake fluid pressure. The insidious part is that this corrosion is internal and hidden. You can't see it. You might not notice it during normal riding. Then you need to brake hard in an emergency, and you discover your brakes have been slowly failing. The front brake provides 70 to 80% of a motorcycle's stopping power. Losing front brake pressure in a panic stop is a death sentence. You have no time to figure out what's wrong. You're already crashing into whatever you were trying to avoid. Suzuki allegedly knew about this for 2 decades and continued shipping bikes with the defective master cylinder design. That's not an oversight. That's a calculated risk taken with other people's lives. Number 2, Kawasaki H2750 Mach 4, 1972 to 1975. The bike that earned the nickname the Widowmaker. The H2 Mach 4 produced 74 horsepower from a 750 cubic centimeter 2-stroke triple. That's 1 horsepower for every 6 pounds of weight. In 1972, that power-to-weight ratio was staggering. The problem was that Kawasaki wrapped that engine in a flexible, inadequate frame with poor geometry. The bike was notorious for violent tank slappers, especially under hard acceleration or at high speeds. The steering would begin oscillating so violently that riders would be thrown off. The trail numbers, which determined stability, were far too small to handle the engine's power. Kawasaki later added a steering damper, essentially admitting the original design was dangerously unstable. The H2 killed enough riders that its reputation became legend. Experienced motorcyclists knew what Widowmaker meant. It meant a bike that could suddenly decide to throw you off without warning, without anything you could do to stop it. The combination of massive power, flexible frame, and poor geometry created a machine that actively fought the rider. When it decided to tank slap, your options were to get thrown or somehow muscle through oscillations violent enough to break bones from impact with the tank and handlebars. Number 1. The universal risk, heavily modified bikes. The most dangerous motorcycle isn't a specific model. It's any bike where modifications have compromised the original engineering. Swapping in a more powerful engine without upgrading the frame, brakes, and suspension. Installing aftermarket components that change handling characteristics in ways the rider doesn't understand. Removing safety features to save weight or achieve a certain aesthetic. Every modification creates a ripple effect through the entire system. Change the engine power and suddenly your stock brakes can't stop you. Change the suspension and the frame might not handle the new forces. Install wider tires and the steering geometry changes. Manufacturers spend millions engineering these systems to work together. When amateur modifiers start swapping components, they're often creating combinations that have never been tested. The crashes from modified bikes don't get recalls. There's no NHTSA investigation. There's just a rider who thought they were improving their bike and instead created a machine with unpredictable, dangerous characteristics. The defect isn't in the original components. The defect is in the modified system that nobody engineered, nobody tested, and nobody validated as safe. Now that you know which bikes to avoid, you need to know which ones actually last forever. Check out my video on the 23 most reliable old motorcycles that never break down to discover the bikes that were engineered right from the start and still run flawlessly decades later.